Hello, good morning, happy Tuesday, day after Memorial Day. This is the part where we'd ask you that thoughtful question like, if we could tell you the magic way to make a bajillion dollars in 5 minutes or less, would you keep listening? And you go, yes, of course. But let's be real, that doesn't happen. It's not going to happen. We'd rather focus on what your issue of the day is and how we can help you find some little way to move forward. Not a huge, huge movement, but just a little movement, one step closer to your goal. This is where we're going to figure it out. I'm Bob Graham, remote from my car. That's Tom Brush, same place as always. This is today's Antidote.
Yes, welcome. It's fun to kind of do this first time remotely.
Yeah, I like it. Although I got to tell you, it's weird being in a car doing this. I can't move my arms as much. And there's a steering wheel, which throws it. By the way, because we always get haters, I am not moving at the time. I am stationary. Okay, just so we're clear.
Very important to make sure we're clear, because that would be
reckless.
I was actually going to talk about a risk that you put yourself at risk, but all right, you went to reckless. That's true. It would be reckless.
It would be. So our topic this week, in case you missed us yesterday, because we started this off yesterday, and you might have had other plans because you were just enjoying your day off, and totally cool with that. We're talking about confronting risks because we all must confront risks. And yesterday, my summary would be that there's no way to go through a day without a risk. You're going to face risk. I'm driving today and I've gone through some traffic lights and my light was green and the other way was red. And I took the risk that people would actually follow the red light, which to me is one of the amazing things about human existence, that we all obey traffic lights when, if you think about it, any one of us could not, and it would throw the whole system out of whack. So we're dealing with risks related to our business. Jump in here, Tom. I've said enough for a minute.
Well, I just was trying to process what if we all didn't follow the streetlights. That would be interesting. Anyhow, no, I think,
or just one of us.
I'm sorry?
If just one of us didn't follow those traffic lights, because then we would have the uncertainty when you went up to a green light, is this going to be the time?
Right. Well, and I think, as you said, yesterday we sort of identified risk. And I think today is a little bit about why it's, why there's value in risk, why it can be important for us to put ourselves out there, to take a chance with something that we think has value and that we feel that others will benefit from being a part of it.
Right. So there's the need to calculate what that risk is, but still very few things that are successful occur without some risk, because to create something new is to enter the world of risk.
Right.
Going around today, Tom?
Yeah, I don't know. It's that day. To me, it was being outside and sinuses are all messed up.
Me too.
And that was a risk, a calculated risk. But I think that's the thing, is that at some point, if you're going to make change, the only way to create change is at some point you have to take a risk that something is going to be valuable and that it's going to be something that's going to move you forward.
I think of the successful business people I've been lucky enough to meet and work with, and all of them have been people who take risks. And I've been in rooms, what I would call a go, no-go decision on a new business. And I was in a room a couple of years ago where we had done a whole lot of work to prep a business to get ready to go. And we got to the final stage, which was a IP review by a lawyer. And the lawyer came back and I was in contact with the lawyer and they said to me, you could go forward, but that risk is too great.
Yeah.
You're going to get into trouble because what this company was doing was going to step on Google's toes, potentially Facebook, and some of the other photography vendors. And it just wasn't worth the risk. Even though it was a perfectly good business model, everything was great. It was just calculation. It's like, the potential risk, the potential legal exposure is huge. So therefore, it just didn't make sense. The plus side didn't equate. And that was the first time I was really in that situation where it was everything was pointing in the right direction except that one thing. And that risk, that one risk was so big potentially. Couldn't
Right.
even put a number to it, that it just shelved a perfectly good project at probably, if it were a spaceship, like 10 seconds before liftoff.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's hard as a business person to think about it. Although one of my good friends, Greg Heitner, checking in this morning, saying that enjoying today's take. I think he is a guy who defines someone who is willing to take risks. I've known him for a long time. He's a local business guy. He, I think, is always one of those people who's thinking about what's the next thing and not being afraid to step out and look at something a little bit differently and try to figure out, like, how much risk am I taking? How do I figure out whether or not it is worth it? And I think that's a challenge, how to figure out and how to balance that risk internally is so difficult to figure out. Trying to sit and decide, like, you almost play both sides. And that's, I think, the value of community is you talk to others about their input on what do you think about this? Just like your example, they went to a lawyer to say, what are we looking at here? What are the opportunities and what are the challenges? And, I think some of the small risks, it's easy to take because you know what the results are. Some of the bigger risks you don't know. And so getting some outside, at least feedback or advice, is really beneficial to understanding what you might be looking at in terms of liability.
What if some people look at it as risk and other people, like it sounds like your friend Greg, look at it as more of an opportunity? So, for instance, it's Tuesday. Tomorrow at 4:30 in the afternoon, they're doing a space launch. Elon Musk's group is going to send the first U.S. citizens up towards the International Space Station in years. That's a high risk proposition. Watching spaceships go off, I remember as a kid watching them. That's always risky. But the potential reward to his company, to the US, to the world is huge. Now, there are two astronauts who could die in that process. That's a reality. You know it and I know it. But the potential reward is so great that risk presumably is worth it to figure out what we can do, how we can be better at these things.
Yeah, this is why I love my friend Greg, because he always comes up with some great things. He says, in his opinion, your risk tolerance changes every day and every year. And I think that's a fascinating point. Are we more risk averse the older we get, or because we have more knowledge and experience and understanding, are we more comfortable with risk because we have a better appreciation or grasp of what might be in front of us based on that risk? What's your thoughts on that, Bob?
Well, it could depend on the situation. If someone is financially set, they can probably assume greater risk. Or if you have children in college, you might assume less risk. If you grew up in an entrepreneurial environment, you may be comfortable with risk because that was the discussion around the dinner table. When I was growing up, the discussion of two teachers and then a government employee and a teacher there was no risk. You just went to work and did work. So anything that's entrepreneurial for me feels very risky because I was never exposed to that as a child.
Interesting.
Don't you think that plays into it as well?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt how we grew up plays a role, like with almost anything, and who we're around, and the people that we're connected to, who, we can see as examples. Sometimes I think when you watch others take risk, it's easier for you to step out and take a risk. But if you're not around those type of people, it's very hard for you to feel comfortable because that the downside, and of course you get in your mind, the downside could be significantly worse than you may think, than it may really be, because that's how you've processed it.
Right. And so much of this, like so much of what we discuss, is really in your head. Because the reality is, no matter what you do every day, there is risk.
Why does it always come back to it's in our head?
What? But isn't it though?
No, you're absolutely right.
I hate to keep saying that, but give me an alternative, because how can you calculate risk realistically? Because you and I could look at the same situation. Okay, Tom, would you jump out of an airplane and skydive? No. Okay, I wouldn't either. But I know plenty of rational people that would and do. And to me, that risk is way too extreme. The risk of driving my Mini Cooper 125 miles an hour, way too risky for me. But I saw online a guy yesterday who filmed his car going 130. So that's in our head, because presumably all humans are at our core the same. So some people see it as risk, some people see it as a reward. I mean, I guess it'd be fun to drive a Mini Cooper 130 miles an hour. It'd be way cool. But I'm not willing to risk getting a speeding ticket, having points on my record, crashing it, hurting someone else, hurting myself, the embarrassment that goes with it. Those things mitigate it for me.
All right, so Chrissy is joining in. She did say good morning, but
Hey, Chrissy.
She is saying she has jumped out of a plane. The best feeling in the world. Look at that. Who would have known that we had somebody on this morning who has jumped out of a plane?
Here's my question. Was her best feeling jumping out of the plane, or was it when she hit ground and she was alive? I think the best feeling might have been the second one.
That's a pretty good question. Hopefully she'll answer that, because I would agree. And I would wonder too, like, what was going through her head at the final minute when she's like, all right, I'm holding onto the side of the plane and I could still turn around because the plane's going to land, or I'm going to take a step out and jump. And I think that to me is another fascinating thing of like, what finally pushes you over the point to take that risk? You know, what's the last, not straw, but what is the thing that says, okay, this is okay for me to do this, and now I'm going to move forward?
Well, and think about it. Once you step out of that plane, it takes you, I believe, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, maybe longer to get to the ground. Now you've assumed the risk, and now you're in the reward phase. And you're completely powerless if you think about it.
Well,
you're just going down.
Right,
pull the cord. But I'm saying you don't have a lot of control over the outcome at that point, really. You're subject to wind and a parachute.
Right.
And maybe that's the parallel in business, is when you pull that cord, now you've got to just go with it and not make it worse than it is. Once you're out of the plane, you can't lament the fact that, hey, I should have stayed in the plane. That was a really bad decision.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Now it's interesting. Chrissy shares that she was attached to someone. They jumped for me, so she didn't have any choice. She's
right, because you do the tandem jump the first couple times.
Maybe. Then you have to have a lot of trust, right, in the person you're with. She said,
pray that person's not reckless.
Correct. She said, hitting the ground was great, but the initial feeling of falling was very powerful. I love that. That's a very, and I'm sure it is, the freeing feeling of, although I don't know, I think my mind would be going a million miles. I think once the parachute opened, I would be a little more comfortable.
Well, and in business, don't we go through the same thing? I mean, I've done things in my career where it just, it was like jumping out of a plane. Not quite that extreme, but certainly that the feeling was one of, this is the most insane thing in the world I could possibly do. And you go forward, and once you do it, it's like, okay, here it is.
True. Well, and I think then you have to just keep going with it, right? You got to do if you have a plan, if your plan is, okay, I'm going to fall for a while, then I'm going to pull my cord, and then I'm going to guide myself to the ground. That's almost what we do once we step forward with something and say, all right, I'm out here. The only thing I can do is follow my plan.
I guess the other alternative, Tom, is that you abandon your plan right at that point where you're going to have the exhilaration. And that's probably what a lot of people do. They get to that moment where it could actually be fun and exhilarating is the best word, I guess. And they go, oh, you know what? I'm going to hop back in the plane. Never mind. I mean, I know I've done that.
Sure.
I've done that a number of times. You know, you step your feet, or you put your feet in the water, and the water's too cold, and you're afraid to jump in.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating.
And look at
Chrissy talks about she got so caught up in the exhilaration, she forgot to pull the cord. Not obviously, she eventually. And the guy that she was attached to kept like pointing at the altimeter, saying like, "It's time." So she's not going to pull. So she won't be jumping by herself, which I think is a great analogy towards what we do in business. You know, many times if we try to do something all on our own, we sometimes get caught up in the moment. But if we go along with others, and others are there to support us, they're there to remind us, hey, guess what? You better pull the cord. You better follow your plan to stay in the path of where you're going. Because we can get so caught up in you launch a new product, and there's the exhilaration of, oh yeah, people are interested, but then you're like, oh, well, wait a minute. If we're not doing our marketing right, or if we're not getting out and about to being connected with people, all of that initial stuff is not going to work if we get so wrapped up in like this immediate success or exhilaration. How do we make sure that once we've taken that risk, we're able to keep moving forward and following the plan that we have? Uh-oh, I think we lost Bob. That's not good. I think he was parked at
you there?
We are. I thought maybe
Oh, boy.
Starbucks cut you off. I can hear you, but we can't see you.
Am I back?
You are. There he is.
Am I back? There I am. Sorry. I just wanted to make sure I had technology problems just to be consistent. Far be it for me to actually get this through perfectly once.
That is too funny.
So Tom, I seem to be losing my so I was getting ready to say, isn't it great that I can be outside of Starbucks and have better technology than in my home? But alas, Starbucks wouldn't help me with that. So Tom, we've covered this pretty well. Why don't we talk about what that one thing someone could do today is?
I think for me it is, if you're considering something that you think is risky, one, don't be afraid of it, and two, go find others to talk about so that you get some of their knowledge and experience, so that you have a better perception of what are the potential outcomes, which might make it seem less risky.
I love that. I would add to it, one of the things we're doing in our Ring of Renegades, that Facebook group we've created that anyone's entitled to join. Feel free to join us there. We've created that community where you can actually talk about the things. So you can talk about, I will certainly be commenting on Chrissy's comments about skydiving. And there are other things going on in there. And that's a place where you could share these things that, hey, I'm considering doing this. What do you think? And getting people's impressions. And if you hit a moment of concern or fear, the group can support you and help you get to that place where, hey, you know what, this is reasonable or this is unreasonable. I think that would really be helpful. I know I use that in the group, and I will use that more and more, because that's what gets me over the fear I have when things get risky, is having people go, you know what? You think it's scary, but really that's not a bad idea. That's actually a good thing. You should go ahead with that. Right. So if that's something of interest to you, you can go to the Ring of Renegades. I think with that, Tom, we should probably close things up. It is today's Antidote. I'm Bob Graham. That's Tom Brush. We'll be back tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern. Can't wait.
Have a great day, everyone.